Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of Miriam Talks About Things. Now, in this episode there is quite a few things to talk about actually, so I think without further ado we get into this new episode. So, the new year has started. It was a more or less great start. It was a bit rougher than I was expecting, but I am doing alright now, or good now, so that's exciting. And when we last talked in like the usual format was right before I was publishing my episode of my favorite books of 2019. So if you haven't caught that favorites episode, I will be linking it in the description box. And I want you to know that when I'm saying I'm going to link it in the description box, you can be sure that my finger is pointing down, so as if you can see it. So I hope you appreciate the effort. So yeah, if you haven't caught that yet, the link is in the description. So what I would like to do is just catch you up a little bit on life stuff. Then mostly I would like to talk to you about everything I've read since we last talked. So just quickly, yesterday I got the news that, or like the news for my final outstanding response for my finals, and I passed all 3 of the finals I took, so or like wrote. So yeah, that's fun. Soon, in about 20 days, we're going to have to book the new models, so that's going to be something. I will keep you posted on that. But yeah, so far so good. So that is all settled, which is good. And for the rest of semester break, I think I'm going to take it slow. I realized that this is going to be the plan. Probably not going to socialize as much as I thought, but you always have to find what makes you happiest, and at the moment that is going to be reading. I think I will be going to explore places, but I would like to do that on my own. So yeah, that's always fun. So probably catch you up on that as well. Now on to the reading. Last time when we talked about like what I'm currently reading, I was in the middle of this, let's call it small or mini poetry binge, which was fantastic, and I would like to talk to you about the collections I've read. So the first one, and the one I finished and told you that I was in the middle of, was the poetry collection called Bone by Yrsa Daley-Ward. And for me, this one was a very strong 4 stars. I mentioned that I really felt that there was an urgency in the words and the poems in this collection, and I really appreciated that it was sort of this mix between shorter form and longer form poetry, and I thought that the selection of the poems was very deliberate and very well thought out, and the topics were truly very moving, heartbreaking at times even, and that how the author was able to transport that through her words was really worked well for me. And I will be looking into the author's work in the future. So that was definitely a success. not so much a success, unfortunately, was the poetry collection I Love My Love by Reyna Biddy. This just wasn't for me. I can see it being important and being personal to the author, and I appreciate it, and I can see that, and I respect their showing us their way towards self-love. But unfortunately, the execution of that was not for me at all. I personally, firstly, didn't really see any logic behind how the poems were grouped together. And I found the prose, for example, way too simplistic and not really moving. And at times I was even annoyed by the poet's voice. I can see this might be for someone else, but it was not for me, unfortunately. So I gave it a 2 stars. Yes. Again, might be for someone else. Then I read When the Ghosts Come Ashore by Jacqui Germain. This again was a truly powerful collection, and one I would highly recommend if you come across it. I truly think that the author is extremely talented with words, and what I especially appreciated about this collection is that to me it felt that every poem had something really clever and really unique going on, may that be in like symbolism or style or layout. Yet the collection as a whole also made a lot of sense, and the grouping was very well thought out. And what I found interesting is that I didn't really have like one single standout poem, and that is not because they were not good, but simply because I thought that every poem was on the same high level as the other poems in the collection, and I think that's something really great. So I gave it a strong 4 star as well. Now then, sort of my Christmassy reading started or picked up again, if you want to call it that, because I read 10 Blind Dates, We Are Okay, Frost Heart, which are all set during winter times at the beginning of December. So we're still in December right now. Not right now, so just with like my narrating of my reading. So I read Hercule Poirot's Christmas. I read the German translation, as I am collecting the German versions of the Agatha Christie novels. And I have to say, this is one of my, probably the favorite Agatha Christie I've read so far. I gave it a 4.5 stars. And throughout the novel was 4 stars. I think Christie's crime fiction to me are always just an absolute a delight to read. And I found them always very well crafted and engagingly written. The reason this got a 4.5 stars for me and ended up being this high is definitely how it all wrapped up and the solution, and how going back you see how well that was crafted. So that extra 0.5 star was definitely for the crafting or the setting up of the solution. I really highly enjoyed it, and I'm really in the mood to read more, so that might happen in the future, in the possibly near future. Then I read something rather delightful as well, and that was right on Christmas Eve. I read a Peter Stamm work, and it's his most recent and his like very thematically accurate book, and that is Marcia's Vermont, eine Weihnachtsgeschichte, which translates into Marcia from Vermont, a Christmas carol, I guess. So that's basically what it is. It is set during Christmas. That's why I decided to read it then. And yes, I gave it 5 stars. I don't think I will ever give a Peter Stamm book anything less than a 5 stars. And this was actually my pick for my 100th book of the year. So I finished this one actually before I finished Hercule Poirot's Christmas. I read that in between, again for Christmas evening. So that's making Hercule Poirot's Christmas my 101st book for the year of 2019. This is a weird story to explain to you, but basically it's about this narrator who has very much resemblance with the author in a way, since they share a name, which is something that I found is really much telling of Peter Stamm's work. There's always some similarities to the author's personality or career or something like that, and no difference here. And again, once more, the writing style was just brilliant in true typical Peter Stamm fashion, and in true typical Peter Stamm fashion, the themes were, as always, a sort of mix of truth and imagination, and how different people remember things differently. Because it's this story about, again, this narrator, Peter, who sort of a couple of years ago met Marcia in Vermont, and the story is set up as he remembers going back to Vermont for an artist retreat, what happened, and some hints and things start reappearing. That was my phone. I hope you didn't really pick that up. But yes, it was that mix of truth and imagination, and again how things are remembered differently. And I thought it was a very fantastic choice to read on Christmas Eve. The atmosphere was really strong in this one, especially strong. And yeah, I was really glad to read this. And at the end of December, I started and then finished in the new year a book by Kerstin Gier. I read the German version, but it will be translated very, very soon into English. And I read the German version because it is firstly published in German, and it's called Wolkenschloss. The English translation will be called A Castle in the Clouds. And again, it was by Kerstin Gier. And the story is set in Switzerland, which I found really, really interesting. And it follows, in the English version, she is called Sophie, but in the German version, she's called Fanny. But I can guess why it was renamed. But it is set in, again, Switzerland, in the Swiss mountains. And there's this grand hotel that is very much into tradition and all that. And a very famous New Year's Eve ball is held there. And guests from all around the world arrive there. And sort of fill the Grand Hotel with life again. And Sophie works as an intern then in this hotel, or Fanny, and things start to develop, and some people might not be exactly who they are, and Sophie finds herself in an adventure that she probably was not expecting to experience. At first I had a bit of trouble getting into it, but it ended up really being a super charming and sweet novel. I gave it 4 stars in the end. I especially like the character and the settings a lot, and I actually even can see myself revisiting this book now, knowing what is going to happen, and sort of pick up the details. I do have to say that the twists and turns and revelations in the later half of this book were a bit over the top and a little bit unrealistic for me, but the book constantly stayed charming nonetheless. So if you're interested in picking it up when it is published in English, I would highly recommend it. Then I did something really interesting, and that is a reread. So if you have not seen my favorites, again, it's linked in the description. But one of my favorites was, or probably the favorite book, was The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. And through talking about this book, I just really felt the urge to reread it, which is usually not something I do often. But I do have to say that I just loved it just as much, if not more. And again, it grew even stronger. And I think this time around I realized just how carefully and lovingly this book was crafted, and how the book sort of narrated this story that really came together. And I truly think that this is the most heartbreaking yet powerful story that I've ever read, and that none of that power was lost in a second read, even quite the opposite. And I don't think I will ever get tired of returning to this book, and it broke my heart just all over again, but I would not have it any other way. So I truly loved it, and if you want to know more, you can go check out my review in my favorites video. There's a pretty in-depth review there. So that though really just set me in a weird mood of feeling like I need to reread every favorite ever. And I wanted to pick up every favorite, especially Never Will Wake by Marcia Passel, just because I felt like they are only valid favorites because, or when I'm rereading them. And I think that has to do with the fact that we pressure ourselves so much with wanting to perform something, and sometimes that can really not benefit your reading. So I quickly try to put that aside and just focus on my enjoyment of other books and not pressure myself into rereading if I'm not in the mood, because I really was absolutely in the mood for The Broken Girls, and it would be a shame if you just reread favorites because you think you have to. So yeah, that sent me in a weird mood, but then I decided to pick up the book Number One Chinese Restaurant by Lillian. And this sort of is the story set around this local Chinese restaurant called the Beijing Duck House in Maryland, and it sort of looks behind the scenes of like everyone who works there, and like their family ties and tension and heartaches, and just like we're following different characters in their different relationships. And a tragedy strikes, and we see what happens with everyone involved after that tragedy. I think the strongest factor for me, and the reason I ended up giving it 4 stars instead of like maybe 3.5, is definitely the writing style. I thought it was extremely well crafted, and I was fascinated, and I reread passages because again I was so fascinated by how well she crafted this story, and that truly made me convinced that I'm going to pick up her work in the future. It is on the more dense side of writing, so it does lend itself to a slower read, but it's definitely worth it. And the characters are not on the likable side, or they at least have pretty quite a lot of unlikable traits, but they are intriguing and they are interesting to read about, sometimes even because of their flaws. And what I love most about this, besides the reading, are those quiet, calm moments and touching scenes between those characters. That really was what intrigued me most. What actually kept me from giving it an even higher rating, and sort of made me contemplate this 3.5, is that a big driving force of the plot is sort of this mafia-esque shady business type of deal that is hinted and even explicitly mentioned, and I just could have done without that, and in my opinion it didn't fit or benefited the novel. But again, as I said, I will definitely pick up more by this author in the future. Now on to what I'm currently reading, and that is The Flatshare by Beth, which is basically the story about 2 people, Tiffy and Leon. Tiffy needs a cheap flat to stay in, and Leon works overnight and really needs the money. And so Leon sort of takes over the flat while Tiffy's at the work during the day, and she has the place during the rest of the time, and sort of it comes all together through that, and they are starting to leave notes. And I have to say, this is on its way to become a new all-time favorite, and probably my first favorite read of the year. So that's exciting. I really like, I'm not just laughing out loud. I have to put down the book because I'm laughing that much, and it's very well crafted, very well narrated. It's so funny, but also really moving. So I'm highly enjoying this one, and yes, I think I can soon report back that this is my new favorite and my first favorite of the year. So yeah, it's been an interesting one. I've been sort of starting to doubt a lot of the channel again, and a lot of life decisions in general. So it's been an interesting start of the year, and again, it was just frustrating, I think, seeing things stagnate, both with channel growth or channel interaction and also in life, and that just really got overwhelming, and I really started doubting myself and what I'm doing. But it is getting better, and I'm doing fine now, so that's good. Yeah, let me know what you've been reading, and how your year started, and I will talk to you in the next one. Thanks for listening. Bye.